Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or good whatever it is to you. Welcome to the 15th ever Madaxeman Lockdown Podcast. We've got the full gang of 7 back, covering all the usual topics, what they've been painting, what they've been playing, and talking some rubbish this week, especially about the Assyrian army list in Art de la Guerre. We have teaching Timmy about Napoleon returning for the war in Spain. Sean Bean says bastard a lot. We also have Andy's quiz with some cracking questions this week. And then finally, towards the end, we have the usual bits of bonus material, an interesting discussion about road accidents involving animals in the Australian subcontinent. Everything for your wargaming week. Listen out, enjoy the podcast.
This means war.
It's week 15 of the Madaxeman Lockdown Podcast, and 15 weeks, 7 people. We're all here. We're all sat here on Zoom. I think we've actually increased, looking around the screen, the number of people who are actually painting as we speak is probably now more than half, actually, of the people on this. So the obsession with painting continues. And talking of obsessions, the obsessives amongst you will know yet again that there are some questions we always ask online in the descriptions of the podcast, and we were supposed to have covered last week, but we probably forgot to kind of do them. So if I just sort of run around the screen a little bit, we'll start with Simon. First question then, Simon, what blue do you choose for painting denim? What's your go-to dark blue?
I've got a coat d'arms dark blue paint that comes out quite nice.
Okay, Dave Saunders, what's your go-to dark blue?
Denim, but I have 2 blues. So I've got, for light blue, I've got Azul Magico Magic Blue from Game Colour, which covers really nicely as a light blue. And then I've got Model Colour Vallejo Dark Prussian Blue. I think the Dark Prussian Blue is the darkest blue I can find.
Okay, Mr. Webb, does the word Prussians make you and your Austrians just quiver anyway, or in disgust?
Sorry.
Or
Why would I be painting them wearing jeans? I've got to have them in chinos and a nice polo shirt.
Yeah. Just do your kind of East London hipster vibe on me with the chips. So you're just saying dark blue is not a colour you do. It's either Austrians or jeans. Neither of those two really work. You're going to need some dark blue. Do you have a favourite dark blue?
Favorite dark blue, stormy blue.
Stormy blue. Okay.
Got it right
Stormy
here.
blue.
Else.
Is that?
Okay. Tamsin, what's your favourite go-to dark blue?
For denim, I tend to go with Vallejo Model Colour Dark Sea Blue as base. Okay. Sometimes dark Prussian Blue or Oxford Blue. If I want a slightly sort of purple tinge on it.
Right, so you've got 3 different blues for denim. That's just the best answer. Brilliant. Andy, what about you? What's your go-to dark blue?
Coat d'arms marine blue.
Marine blue. And Adam, painting away. Are you painting blue as we speak?
No, painting metal. Never painted jeans, but my go-to dark blue is Model Colour Prussian blue.
Model Colour. So there's a big
chinos as well. There's
a big consensus for Prussian. I think I've got a very old, I'm not even sure it's still called this, Citadel Magraggy blue or something like that. It's probably had 4 different names since then. Okay, next question then, quickly going around in the same order, starting with you, Simon. How would you pronounce your name in a Swiss bowling alley?
What, first name or surname?
You can go for whatever you want. You're in a Swiss bowling alley. They've asked you for your name so they can type it into the display above the alley, above the whatever it's called in a bowling alley. Aisle, is it? Lane.
Yep, lane. Yep. Guten Tag, mein Name ist Simon Leray Meyer.
He's copped out, got a little bit German. Saunders, what about you?
Saunders, me. I was going to say, it depends whether it's Italian, French, or German bowling green alley.
That choice is yours.
Je m'appelle David Saunders.
So
David
it's Spanish.
Saunders. It's Spanish.
David.
Peter, what about you? Go be cosmopolitan on us in your chinos.
Oh, it'd have to be sort of like very official Swiss German. So it comes out as just a bark. Peter.
Okay. Tamsin, what about for you? You're in a Swiss bowling alley. They're asking for your name.
I'd probably end up spelling it phonetically.
Right. Okay.
The weird thing is, many years ago, for a union conference I was attending, they booked us all in centrally in a hotel, and the hotel had managed to put me into 2 rooms.
Cool.
It's Tamasin and Piper.
Okay, so you could be Tam. Oh yes, yeah, that's a very, very weird Scottish Chinese hybrid thing going on there. Then, Mr. Finkel, how would you check into a Swiss French bowling alley?
Well, Andy, they'd probably spell it Andi, and Finkel sounds fairly Swiss anyway. They'd probably try and conscript me into the army on the basis they think I'm a deserter, I suspect.
You could be learning to shoot and driving a small retro style Leopard 1A.
I'd be firing crossbow bolts, apples off your head in no time.
Right. Okay. Mr. Warsdale, what about you? You're in Switzerland. You're in a bowling alley.
If it was in German Swiss, I would pronounce it Adam. If it was French Swiss, I would pronounce it Adam. And if it was Italian Swiss, I'd probably go with Adam.
That's very consistent. You've got all the bases covered there. That's fantastic. I guess I've asked this question. I haven't really given it much thought myself. I think I'd probably go optimistic that they do speak French, a bit as bad as me. And I go with the Dave Saunders approach, Je m'appelle Tim, and then see if that works. Excellent. And then for our final question from last week, the question is, it's very simple, yes, no. Did Napoleon get irritated with the Austrians, always suing for peace after he beat them? Or did he just kind of shrug his shoulders gallically and live with it? Simon, yes, no, shrug. Shrug, he's shrugging. Saunders?
Je ne l'aime pas.
He didn't like it. Mr. Webb?
Yeah, it gives him something to do, something else to look forward to in a couple of years' time.
He was happy for the extra opportunity to beat them again. Tamsin?
Absolutely.
I agree with Peter.
Yeah, he loved beating the Austrians. Any opportunity was great. Mr. Finkel, try and keep your answer to under 5 minutes and don't refer to the hats. We've got that as a special section later.
Yes.
The short answer is yes.
Okay. All right. And Adam?
Probably not as annoyed as he got with the Russians for not suing for peace after he beat them.
All right. Okay then. Well, I think I'd definitely go with a shrug because that's all I know about French people.
This means war.
Brilliant. Well, that's answered all of the questions from last week's podcast that we were supposed to have answered last week, but we failed to. So that's a good catch up for all of you. And now it's time to start going around in a different random order, just to keep everyone on their toes on the week's painting. So starting with Mr. Finkel, you're painting as we speak. What is it this week? What's making the painting pile?
It's still the Seleucid pikeman. Last week wasn't a good painting week for me. Life got in the way, things like work, watching football, actually playing ADLG online, stuff like that,
All good stuff.
So I didn't get very far with the painting. I did a little bit, but not as much as I would have done if I'd had less to do.
Okay. So what are you actually, you're literally painting something as we speak? But is this,
I'm
just started, you had a blank week? Is this the first day that you've given them a go?
No, because I started about a week ago and did a little bit earlier today, and I'm now carrying on with it. So I reckon I'm about between a third and a halfway through. I'm painting 24 figures for 2 pikemen units for ADLG.
Are you going with, kind of whitey linen-y armour, or are you going for that sort of coloured boulder effect?
I think I'll go for
or hats?
Yeah, they've got linen pants, and I'm going for, as Dave suggested, for the white linen armour on the kind of Peterges, I think he called them. And then I suppose a red T-shirt, basically.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a red T-shirt.
Linen pants? What colour are you doing their trousers?
Yeah, we go. Linen pants.
Oh, that's a bit close. Sorry.
So they're basically Bactrian phalangites from the Eastern Empire. That's why they've got trousers on. So they're the ones I got.
That sounds like some sort of disease, that.
Yeah, when in Bactria it gets so cold, you can't walk around without any undies on, can you?
Well,
you often walk out undies on, Dave.
Well, we've been in lockdown for 3 months, so
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
They don't call Dave Mr. Commando for nothing.
Exactly, that's called Go Commando in Macedonia.
Yeah, please don't visualise that.
What's more under your kilt? Nothing. It's all in excellent condition. Boom, boom.
Yeah. So, so Dave, we've talked about whatever subject you just all got us onto there for the Highlands of Bactria. What about the Highlands of Harrow? What have you been doing up there? And please don't refer to your underwear.
Yeah, okay. So the Egyptians are finished for the moment.
Right.
Until I can order some more, because I've got to get some more chariots. But that's for the future. But I've now moved on to the Khorasan
Janissaries?
Turks.
Sorry. So, how many chariots is not enough chariots?
Well, I've only got 4 so far. I bought 4 just to
You're not
see
taking this seriously, Dave, are you? Come on.
So I think I need another
12.
Yeah, probably. I think another 8 minimum.
Well, I think you've definitely got to get to 8 because then that'll give you 12, and then you definitely realise that's too many.
Yeah.
4
You
might
can
be
use
the
some
right
of them as
amount.
command vehicles, can't you?
Well, you need 3 for the generals.
Okay.
You can't expect your generals to walk. Not
I've
the
done
Egyptian army.
the Pharaoh in his chariot, and I've got through. I mean, it was basically a trial to see what those chariots look like, and they paint. They I was a bit disappointed, but they paint up quite nicely.
Okay. And what about the Ottomans then? That's something you've had in a drawer for a while, I think you were saying.
Well, they were sort of a hand-me-down from Sean at the club. He bought them from America at expense, and he said I could have them for 50 quid. So I thought that's a bargain. And I've got a Khorasan Byzantine army I've done before, so I know what they're like. But I was a bit weird that they're a bit grey-style, a bit small, a bit puny, but they're painting up really, really nicely. Really nicely.
Okay. And
the Janissaries are definitely the best Janissaries I've ever painted.
You found some good ones. It's a miracle.
Finally,
Fantastic.
yeah. In fact, they're so good, these Janissaries, that what I think I might do is actually get that when I do put an order in for them, they've got these are the later Janissaries. They've actually got an early Janissary, so I might have both options.
Wow. So what makes them so good then? Is it just mix of poses or just dynamism, or do they take paint well?
They take the paint well. I mean, I think there's 4 poses of Janissary firing, but they're all sort of firing forward. They're not firing in silly angles or silly poses. They're quite similar. So one's fired, one's got an overarm action. So they look similar, but with enough detail. You know, when you look closer, you can see there's a difference. And there's one static guy who's sort of making up the numbers. I think they're really, really nice figures, the way they modelled them and that. Yeah, I'm really, really pleased with them.
Have you just done
So what's the difference with the early one?
Just the uniform slightly different cap. The headdress was a little.
They're not Napoleonic, are they?
No.
No, well, not with bows.
Yeah.
They kind of stopped that.
In fact, I've been so taken with Ottomans. I've been looking at 28 millimeter Ottomans.
Wow.
There you go.
You say that.
That way lies madness.
Hang about. Calm down, everybody. So that's got everybody excited. Talk us through it.
You know the Spanish Tercio make, but they did a what's it called? What's your favourite thing, Peter?
Kickstarter.
Whiskey.
Yeah. And they're really good Kickstarter, but they don't do all the figures that they had in the Kickstarter now. So that's it.
Well, you could always do a Napoleonic Ottoman army.
Gordon's got one. It's quite pretty looking.
Very
I found a decent 28mm Janissary.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. But most of the 28 millimeter Janissaries you find are armed with guns because they're all made for pike and shot and things like that. So finding actually nice bow-armed ones is difficult.
So have you not?
No, I've not done anything about it yet.
Oh, that's cheered me up. Because I was getting a bit worried that the world would be a different place if you actually found a Janissary figure that you liked. But now you've gone to 28mm and you can't find a decent one. The world's as it should be, I guess.
It's definitely back on course.
Yeah, then when you find some of those, you can go to being disappointed with 20mm ones or something like that.
Yeah.
We can just keep you disappointed forever.
Plymouth in January's biblical 25mm. So I'm thinking about sorting an army out for that.
That's true. When we're all back on the road. Okay, then. So that's your painting.
I mean,
So
Dave was
Simon-
bound to be painting something in red this week, wasn't he? After Liverpool winning the league.
These Janissaries in red.
Yeah. Which sponsor have they got on their shirts? Is it back to the Crown Paints era?
It's definitely Crown Paints. Definitely.
They're definitely Crown Paints era.
But I
Okay.
always had a soft spot for the candy washing up machines.
That was also a good one as well. Well, that's a
Taste
kind
of
of cool.
candy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Mr. Leroy Mayer, then, what are you painting as we speak? Is it still your accidental enormous elephant purchase?
No, we're not talking about the accidental elephant purchase. There was a frosting incident with their matte varnish, so
Okay.
not happy.
So did
That
you
was the elephant.
manage
I
to
thought that
resolve
was for
that?
something else.
Did you manage to resolve that? Because it was
No.
very humid last week, wasn't it? So that's always a risk.
Yeah, I didn't really realise how humid it was, and so I matte varnished the elephants and the 7 Years' War hussars. And then as I did the one side of them, all of a sudden the hussars started frosting up with this nice snow colour. So I'm hopefully this week when it dries out a bit, I'm going to see if I can try to recover them. So if not, they're getting stripped. Yay!
Oh God! Oh, what a nightmare. So yeah, because I think when on WhatsApp we all suggested a variety of different ways of fixing them. Which I think what was it? There was do gloss varnish, do another layer of matte, use olive oil. All sorts of different ways. Which is there one that you're going to try first? Or,
I'm going to try the one I've seen suggested by a few painters is that you matte varnish them again, because when the matte varnish touches the matte varnish again, apparently it dissolves it and it restarts the process. And in some scenarios, the painters who have had frosting incidents have said, you heat your miniatures up a little bit, matte varnish it again, and then let them settle, and the frosting gets resolved. So we'll see what happens next week. Stay tuned.
I'm just looking around the screen here, and I'm torn between: do I go to Tamsin for the actual really detailed proper answer, or do I go to Peter because he looks like he's screwed this sort of stuff up many times before and probably has tried all the options? And I think I'm going to go with Peter first. Peter, tell us the stories of, because you've done this with the undercoat, starting with the gold and the black.
Gold paint.
Yeah, I've done it with the undercoat, but I've actually done it with the varnish. I've had a whole army that came out all frosty because I sprayed a massive tray of it all at once. And then got very disappointed because next day I was at an event, and then 3 old and bold different people at different times of the event were all telling me to do this matte varnish spray thing, which I promptly did as soon as I came home, and it all turned out nicely. So it's just I was getting really pissed because it was one of my first armies I painted. It took me bloody ages, and then spraying that matte varnish and it all getting frosty just really pissed me off. So yeah. The matte varnish again, just make sure the can's right and it's the right temperature, and this weird thing of humidity in the UK, which we're just not used to, isn't around. And then it all sort of recovered, but you just got to make sure it's nice and thin. So, it's nice thin coat, go around it, not too heavy, and then it sort of miraculously cured itself for me.
Wow. Okay. So Tamsin, is there a more complicated 16?
Sorry, I'll do Tamsin.
Adam's in.
I'll do Tamsin. What you want to do is get some baby sham and some peat compost and mix it together at 60 degrees, and then just dip it in quickly and flick it off, and that will sort it out perfectly. Yeah. Or something.
I'm more amazed that you found baby sham.
Yeah. Now, is the baby sham, is that organic gluten-free baby sham, or is it more your full-fat version?
It's baby
sham. Right, Tamsin, and finally the real answer. Go on.
The real answer.
Yeah.
I've never had a problem. So
that's the real answer.
Don't do it in the first place.
Don't do it in the first place. That's superb. Good.
Right, time Peter. Will come.
I do almost all my varnishing through. I either brush on or airbrush. So.
Okay. It does.
Yeah. You'll do a video on it, Tamsin, called The Lady Varnishes.
Yeah. Simon, one hint. Just don't get it mixed up with a metallic spray.
No.
Yes, I do keep my gold paint for other purposes.
And always spray one base first before you spray the others.
Just to check that it is varnish and not matte, not black primer.
Just
Well, see,
exactly. Check you've got
I've-
the right thing. Yeah.
No, but see, I found this really, really good way of testing it. I read the label on the can.
Rocket science.
What's that got
rocket
to do with
science.
anything?
So come on, Peter. What disasters or non-lack of postage or things have you had this week? Other than, because I see that there's obviously still that postage vacuum around your house is still preventing the Amazon hair clippers arriving.
No, I've actually had the drone drops, and I've got everything that I actually ordered. So I've finally got all my Austrians, even my geezers, my East End geezers.
Wow. Yeah.
My Genzers, Grenzers, whatever you want to call them.
Geezers.
I've got my Spanish Knights
Mm.
with the flags. So I've got my Navarre Knights. So they're on the painting table ready to do next. But I'm just trying to do a push over the next week to actually get through and finish off my Austrians. Then I've actually got one Napoleon army finished to take on all these people with French armies and then beat them just to prove them wrong.
So
Now,
I guess
Peter-
that's what Napoleon was really good at, just having one last push to get straight through the Austrians. He seems to have done it
Absolutely.
repeatedly.
One last push. And the joy of it is I can use them again and again.
That's
Yeah,
true.
the trick is beat the Austrians and give them a mulligan and say, go on, have another go.
Yeah, keep them going back. Okay, then. All right, then. Tamsin, what about you this week? Has it still been Judge Dreading, or did that get completed?
It's been terrain.
Oh, yes, Scatter, wasn't
Pallets
it?
and things.
Stuff. Just get the gallery open. Oops. Yeah, so it's a mix of stuff. I first started off with some stuff for Judge Dredd, so some shipping containers and some billboards. So I remember last week, Tim, you were saying you were going to be having a go at making your own decals, and
Yeah.
I actually had a go myself with some graffiti decals, and
Wow, okay.
so some
that's
of those are
very
my decals, some of those are ones I got from, who was it? Debris of War, and some
Yeah.
were from Warlord.
Okay.
I mean, it's such a work of art to make them look horrible. Isn't
Yeah.
Yeah.
Counterintuitive,
So where
really.
did you?
Then I moved on to some other bits. So I've got a TT Combat Police Station,
Hmm.
which is for my pulp collection.
That's nice, solid police station, definitely.
Like so, I put that together about 2-3 years ago, and then realised, yeah, it's going to be a bucket of paint with it, paint the interior.
Yeah.
Now I've assembled it, so I dodged painting it until now. And
Right.
then finally, it was a piece of scenery from War Bases for sci-fi.
Yeah, that's a
I think
nice
it's
piece.
Sort of a grav lift shaft or something.
So has your flat been just smelling of burnt wood for the last week, or were these slightly
Not
older
really.
purchases?
Not really. I sort of the burnt smell had pretty much disappeared from these, but by the time today.
Okay. No, they look really, really impressive. Really, really good.
Yeah,
Fantastic stuff.
and I've also got a load of priming done. All that resin stuff that I showed last
Okay,
week.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
been primed, and along with a couple of other bits. And today I've been working on painting a load of pavement sets.
Actual pavements. Oh,
Yeah,
sidewalks,
pavements
possibly.
go on. I MDF pavement pieces.
Yeah, no, that's a point at which I think there's a lot of when you commit to doing pavement, suddenly you realise you commit to doing a lot of pavement. That's it. I think
Yeah,
I did some once with little tiles that you peeled off and glued down to actually make them as well.
These were MDF sections ready done, so I didn't have to. So it's just a case of painting.
That's exactly what I thought I should have done after I'd done all the tiles, for sure. It's very much the way. So I think I'm just looking around the thing. So before we come to Adam to round this off, I think my week, as some of you may have seen, has been week of finishing off a couple of little 15mm bits, getting those Carolingian cavalry blokes matte varnish once the weather not got so humid this weekend, but then that's given me kind of a proper week to do a handful of those Malifaux figures, including the ones that I forgot that I had. And it has, Adam, thank you for prompting me to do that, because the change in pace from doing a whole army to half a dozen figures, and the extra time that you can spend on, one or two of them with different little ink washes over bits of it, and dry brushing and layering and doing some other bits and pieces, has been a real good change of pace. It's it was interesting actually, because we all get so much into painting a whole army at a time, and slightly irritatingly, after I'd just spent the week working through these about 6 or 7 Malifaux figures, a guy who, long story about Malifaux, you could get extra models by getting loyalty points, but then you had to post poker chips to America. So suddenly everybody started collecting them, got close to the right number, and then thought, this is going to cost me a fortune in postage. So all the orders ended up being aggregated together at Darksphere, and we all sent off ages and ages ago, probably a year ago or so. And John, a lovely guy from Croydon who doesn't play as much now, had collated them. And this week he said, "Oh, I'm just posting that one model to you that I think I must have given the poker chips away a year ago." So just after I finished all of this set, I've got another single one coming that should be here in another couple of days to do. But I guess it isn't that. Yeah, sorry, where that story was going, possibly nowhere. Maybe it needs to be edited down. But I was saying to him, I've just been painting up, these 10mm armies with 600 small figures, and because he's a Games Workshop single figure sort of guy, his mind was absolutely boggled by the idea of doing an army with 600 figures, even though they're 10mm and they're little blobs with with spots of red and white on them, and you do the unit effect. But it really was such a difference.
If he's sort of like the Games Workshop type, he's probably thinking that you're putting eyeballs on each one of those 10mm figures and such.
Yeah, no, that was the whole point. It was just that whole painting for a unit was so different. But I only put eyeballs on one of the figures that I had. It just had a really bland face that otherwise might have looked a bit weird. So I thought I'd make it look weird with eyeballs, because they never quite work. But my first gremlin, my first green skin thing, and I suppose there must be people out there who've painted legions of orcs and goblins and things like that in their past, but my first green skin thing, which allowed quite a lot of good layering and some blue jeans stuff as well, and some good fire effect.
Yeah, they were very good.
I was really pleased with that. I dug out something on the internet about a couple of years ago when I started doing the models that were on fire, and it's kind of really almost counterintuitive that the base of the fire should be white and the tip of the fire is black, and you build up with layers of washes and inks from white at the bottom to pale yellow to more orange, and then a little bit of red and black tips where the sort of whatever it is just burns into smoke. And so there's quite a few figures with fire, and now that I've cracked how to do fire, I'm just dead keen to paint it as often as possible, because I can do it in a way that's fairly competent. So that's been quite a good one. And I think
warships and aeroplanes and things.
Well, ships and aeroplanes is next. I think I am leaning towards ships as my next thing, but again, like we talked about,
buy a ship for Black Seas or something.
No, I've got the whole starter set for Black Seas ready to go. So I think it's probably likely that makes it. But I think after the conversation about the plastic sprue snipping tool, I'm still sat here thinking maybe I should do those plastic Arabs, just because I can snip a load of stuff off a sprue, just because it's quite satisfying. And I have got the transfer sheets through for the water slide transfers, so that would allow me to crack on and make some of the shields as well. So the Arabs are trying to force their way up the queue, but I might bite the bullet and actually do the ships.
Tip, if you're going to do ships, Tim, is Langton. Do you know that they're the company that do the really nice 1/1200s? They've done a book that I've got it, how to paint. I think it's actually aimed at 1/1200th scale, like wooden warships. But it's a good guide for doing the painting and especially the rigging. So if you're going to paint ships, I think that's a worthwhile investment. Is it actually a hard copy book, or is it sort of a download PDF-y 2-page guide thing? It's a hard copy book. It's about 20-25 pages. They might do it as a PDF. I don't know. Okay. I bought it before such things existed, to be honest, I think. So they might do it as download. But if not, it's worth sending off and waiting for it to come, because it just gives you a good idea of what goes where and what it should look like, and sort of different paint schemes. All right. So.
Now, Tim, sorry, just on the Black the ships you're thinking of, that's for Black Seas, is that right?
It is indeed, yeah.
I saw, I'm just trying to see if I can find the note for it. I forgot to take a note of it. I think the company who made Black Seas or one of the other games has just released a whole bunch of sea monsters.
Yeah.
And
that's all Black Seas.
Yeah. So you wasn't particularly keen or interested in more historical naval ships, but now I can get the Kraken. Now I'm interested.
Right, you're gonna have one of them, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, maybe that's it then. Maybe it's another kind of post-lockdown thing. They're, in fact, we'll get some ships out, and then if you buy into the Kraken, we can have a ships versus monsters fight.
Does that mean I can repurpose my flying gorilla?
It's their latest release.
Yeah, I just saw the pictures. I went, oh, I've got to have one of those for no other reason than it's a Kraken. There was a sea dragon and a giant megalodon shark. Being an Australian, you've got to have a shark.
Yeah, I think they probably run out of nations, haven't they, with proper ships? They've got to release something else in resin. Okay, Adam, then what about you? What's your painting week? What's going on as we speak?
Just cracking on doing the second batch of Mongol cavalry. Didn't do as much as a week before because I basically got the riders done with the horses to remain, but I'm still quite pleased with that painting speed because considering how sunny some of the days were last week, I didn't do very much painting. So to get all the riders done, it's kind of handy. So all pleased about that, and I'm just finishing them off now.
Was there any more kind of, drawing pin up the buttocks kind of scenario going on?
I sort of like listened to Tamsin's advice and it all made sense. And then Peter went, oh, just hold him by the foot and then hold him by the head when you do the feet. And I thought, yeah, fuck it. So
you just went with the lazy option.
So I went with the hold him by the foot option.
Right.
Peter, are you disappointed in him?
Yeah.
Very pleased that he's managed to channel the reality of today's world.
Yeah.
Just
a bit slack. Just a bit slack. You've not sprayed anything gold there, have you, Adam?
No, I haven't. But I am painting whilst drinking beer. So watch this space. I might have a humorous painting story to relate in the next hour or so.
Right. Okay. That's something to work from. Brilliant. Well, look, that's the painting roundup done then. And thank you, everybody, for regaling us with those stories whilst drinking.
This means war.
I've also tried to get my war games covered. That was a major effort.
Oh, right.
Try doing that. You find all sorts of armies.
It's brilliant. It's like going on a free shopping spree. When I did my cover during lockdown, I just found loads of shit that was like, wow, that's like I've
forgotten I had these.
Loads of stuff, but not spending money.
Yeah, no, I don't do that.
I don't do that because if I open the stuff up and start getting stuff out, they'll go, but you don't need to order any more stuff because you've got all that.
No, you don't let anyone see it.
Yeah, that's why you get locks on the doors so you can actually tidy up in comfort and peace. No, I found all sorts of stuff, bits of terrain, things that I'd forgotten from years and years ago. There's so many bits of crappy terrain that have been pulled together.
Yeah, there's one army I've mislaid, but I'm hoping to find it.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms, that's clearing out cupboards. Andy, you've also done some gaming this week, haven't you? I understand, online?
Yes,
on the TTS.
I did. I've had two games. I played in this international league. I played a very nice American chap called David Ray. We started on Wednesday night. Then we had communication problems because Skype, for some reason, then didn't want to cooperate. So we gave up about 11:30. And by then we played 4 turns. And I'd killed 15 points out of his 28. What was he using? Ancient Spanish, and he'd taken 12 out of my 24 Carthaginians. We resumed on Thursday, and I broke his army in 1 turn. The dice went very kindly for me.
Okay, excellent. And then you played another game as well?
Yeah, Dave and I had a mutual destruction yesterday. Medieval heavy metal. I was using French ordnance, and Dave was using medieval Spanish.
So neither of you were tempted by the Scandinavians then after last week? You just decided we're not playing with that one?
Well, I didn't bother. I just put the army together just out of curiosity when we were going to do the list. But I'm trying to French ordnance is an army I might try and use in competitions. So I wanted to try and make 1 or 2 experiments to see if it would work in a.
Andy, sounds like a lot more bloodthirsty using the online one than you are normally around the table.
Well, I just seem to be luckier than online than on the table.
Top of the league, haven't you?
I think I am actually. I mean, I think it's recorded me as having I think it's recorded me as 4 games and 3 wins, but I've actually had 5 games and 4 wins. But I'm not making a fuss about it.
Fantastic.
Did you guys see that thing? I don't know if anybody saw it today. One of the German sort of clubs or groups had put on a historical battle, scenario based on Nazis against the Byzantines or something, and it had an order of battle.
So Merovingian Franks or some mob wandering around Central Europe.
Yeah, it's the Goths and the Franks. I'm really keen on doing it. It's something I studied at university.
But what I find strange about his army list is he's got a strategist embedded in one of the 2 heavy cavalry impact units, and from a game point of view, I wouldn't be comfortable doing that.
Well, I think not from a game point of view, but that's the joy of history, isn't it? I was chatting to Dan Hazelwood online, I think at the weekend, and he was talking about an article he's written for Slingshot that they've not yet published about setting up Cannae as using an AGLG, 200 point and scaling everything up to it. And, there's all this stuff about Cannae, about how the Carthaginian center fell back and it was very clever and all the rest of it. But, he's kind of reverse engineered the actual order of battle and scaled it down to two 200 point armies. And you look at the initial deployment and you think the Carthaginians are going to win this by stoving in the Romans' flanks, without anything clever at all, because the Roman legions are packed deep in the middle in a really deep block. 3 different commanders are commanding the Roman legions. So someone's commanding a column of Romans down the middle. The commanders on the sides are commanding both cavalry and legions in the block, because that was their command structure. And then on almost both flanks, the Carthaginians have just got an overwhelming superiority in cavalry numbers. So they are just going to go forwards, beat the Romans before the Romans can even kind of get out into line or whatever. And it's a bit like that Phil Sabin Lost Battles thing, in that where they try and work out where a battle was fought by playing a game of it, and then saying, well, if the game works properly, it will tell you about how the battle panned out, and if the history is correct or whatever, and where the terrain must have been, because there's always debate about where battles actually took place. Yeah. And this one is just going, if you look at the setup and scale it up, the story of the Carthaginians falling back in the middle maybe is actually relative movement of the cavalry wings coming in and just overwhelming the Romans.
Well, from what I've read, I seem to understand that some of the Romans in the middle actually broke through the Carthaginian lines and headed off to safety. And that the Carthaginian centre buckled because of the pressure of the Romans, not because of any cunning plan on Hannibal's part.
Hannibal put the Gauls in the centre, knowing that they would buckle, and he created a basket. So when the Gauls started falling back, he used his African spearmen who'd been equipped in Roman gear to come up in columns to do the sides of the bucket, and then his cavalry went round either side and filled the hole. And then the Romans were so packed in at the end, they couldn't even move. And the Carthaginians became sickened by the killing that they were conducting. And it was the largest killing zone until the First World War.
I suppose at least with ATLG, the army just breaks at 50% losses anyway, so you don't get that kind of deeply unpleasant end game, really.
Hannibal's brother poured, so the patricians, to be a patrician, you had to have a silver ring. And he poured a bag of rings onto the floor of the Senate back in Carthage and said, now give us the money to finish the job.
Right. Okay. Well, pleasant stories indeed. So, so Dave, how was your half of the mutual destruction game?
Really good, really good. I mean, the TTS, I've never played online at anything before. So this has been a bit of a learning curve. I'm now thinking I'm starting to get the hang of the commands and the sort of like the move. I can actually use the mouse properly now, which is a big advantage. But I can now actually move myself around with the mouse and things. I'm almost there with moving units around. I really like it. I don't think I'm quite ready yet to challenge somebody in America or in Spain. But I think another 2 games and I'd be really up for having a right old go at it, I think, you know.
Yeah,
depending on how long lockdown goes on and how long before we can get any games in. I'd be really keen to play that Byzantine game online.
Well, I'll have a look about building the army list and setting it up, and then because I suppose you could set the whole game up as an object, and or the 2 army lists up as an object, and just drop them onto the table. You could set it up quite quickly. So I'll have a look about doing that and drop something around. So Peter, you were going to be beaten up by one or more of your children this week, I believe. How did that go for you?
Yes, I was due to be, but with it being nice weather and the lockdown opening up, they all run off.
I thought you were going to say you just went to the pub. Friends,
yeah,
wow.
I thought you were going to say that you came down to the beach in Bournemouth.
Yeah.
No. Even I'm more sane than that. I've got gold things to paint instead. No, they all ran off and had fun with friends and that, as teenagers will want to do, which is all very awkward and painful, but there you go.
Okay. And Adam, did you manage to, in the child beating stakes, anything this week for you?
No, it's again, it was nice weather, so we did nice weathery type things.
No, that's probably good. Tamsin, did you get in any games this week? I know you've toyed with that in the past, moving some of the stuff around.
No, I didn't get anything in this week. Too busy sort of painting and doing stuff. But this morning I received my PDF copy of Infamy.
Ah, okay.
Rules. So I've been sort of having a scan through that, looking at the army list, working out what I would need to buy, and think along those lines.
So what's which of their rules is it like, or is it different to everything else? Is it chain of command with phelons, or?
I think there's a lot of mechanisms in there that are common, that are a bit like chain of command. So you've got the force morale trackers and things like that, and how you build. I mean, so I think a lot of their rules have those sort of commonalities about how you add supports to your basic as your base army, but I haven't had a real chance to look at the rules in depth yet.
Yeah, I guess it's had an awful lot of hype, hasn't it? But a lot of coverage this week. But I suppose I kind of look at it and go, I've got all my Saga-based stuff that it would be really nice to use, but it doesn't go back to Saga because it's Roman themed. Do I want another set of other small skirmish scale stuff when actually I'd probably just stick them on ADLG bases and use them as mass battle, because that's kind of what I do.
I would also say, it's like what you say about Saga, it's definitely the zeitgeist now to sort of like mass skirmish is where the popularity at. I'm kind of really bored of the mass skirmish game. It's sort of like, it's quick, it's fun, you can paint the troops quick, but now I'm very much in let's have a proper battle. None of this, it's got effects and sort of like this unit is, I can't be doing with it anymore. So, I'm not going to go for Infamy because it's too much like all the other mass skirmish sets.
Yeah, Saga, Clash of Spears, all those other ones. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Okay, so Simon, have you just rounding out anything for you? Because it's been a blank week for me on the gaming front.
Yes, Saunders and I had our first game of ADLG online. So again, we had a mutual destruction. We had the classic Gauls versus triumphant Romans. So I had a very small army. It was 28 elements. The wall to wall of medium foot and light chariots. So I brought in 8 of them just because I could.
Just because Dave's only got 4, you just wanted to rub it in.
Basically, yeah.
Because he's trying to persuade Dave why he needs to have lots of chariots that he's never going to use.
Yeah.
His medium foot impetuous almost went through my legionaries.
Yeah, it was quite a interesting dichotomy of a game. So Dave had gone for all of his foot were all heavy foot, all elite, all swordsman, all scary. I had wall to wall average, all medium swordsman, and there was lots of dicking around and trying to get into someone's flanks, and then the two lines started to clash and meet, and there was a very high body count. Chariots were being taken off left, right, and center, and I'd pile into him, and then Dave would just charge me in the back and all that. It was really enjoyable.
Good. And you got the hang of the system as well then, the online movement system.
Yeah. Once we some of the key things of learning how to wheel a larger unit where you anchor on the corner that's wheeling and it swings around. Once you got that, I was having my center command of medium swordsman was a small command. It was only 12 wide of medium swordsman. It's like thud. Right, let's try to wheel that around. So that was quite an interesting visual.
Yeah, that's a bit lumpy, isn't it? That's very lumpy.
It was good though. It looked really good. It looked very Gaulish.
Good. Well, hopefully more of those games this week, and see what the weather's like. Maybe there'll be some actual physical outdoor gaming to be done at some point in the next few weeks as well.
This means war.
Well, with that one, I think we're probably on to the army list phase of the week. Fitting in that, and I'm just looking back and trying to remember which army that we selected a
Assyrians.
Beauty.
Assyrian and Sargonid, wasn't it?
The Assyrian
and Sargonid.
Absolutely full scale proper army, number 9. And I believe it was Adam and Tamsin who were doing that. We managed to stop Simon just sending in a list at random this week, which was always good. So looking at the two of them, so we've got Tamsin's list up here first, which looks kind of an interesting mix here. You've got it's called Chariot Command, Infantry Command, Cavalry Command. So I can see it's doing what it says on the tin. Solid initiative of 3, really solid number of units of 20 in the army there. Tamsin, do you want to just describe what's in each command one by one, and then talk us through how you see it being deployed, where it's going to fit?
Yeah, okay. Looking at the two mounted commands, I had a choice. Assyrians, you've got to have go with the chariots, and so I'd say to go with a full-on chariot wing. You've got 4 heavy chariots, an ordinary competent general.
Competent general with the first one, yeah.
And a light cavalry bow just to zip around and sort of stop stuff that targets evading. And you've also got the other mounted command is sort of the cavalry. It's just a micro command, 1 light cavalry bow and 2 heavy cavalry bow elite. We want to make them elite. So that command can go down first or go as a flank march. And the final
Is it not overkill to have a competent commander in there?
Huh?
Is it not overkill to have a competent commander in that corps? You only got 3 units.
Yeah, possibly.
That boosts the initiative up to 3, though. I guess without that, you'd be kind of low on the initiative. You'd only be on 2.
Yeah, maybe. That was part of the reason, and also that I had 3 points.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
The third command it's a solid infantry block. So you got heavy infantry. So you got 2 guards, heavy swordsmen with armor and missile support, and 4 line infantry, heavy infantry, heavy swordsmen with missile support. And alongside those, you've got some medium foot. So you've got a medium swordsman, a javelinman, and 2 Egyptian archers, and also 2 light infantry bow. So you can occupy terrain. You've got plenty of shooting there, and the heavy foot, they'll stick around, they'll block, they'll occupy quite a decent amount of space.
Yeah, so that was six heavy infantry wide. You've got 4 chariots wide to take you up to 10. You can occupy the terrain with probably another 4. So you're 16 combat wide, which is not bad actually, is it? That's starting to get a good chunk of more than half the table. And you said you put the last command down first, for almost certainly, for sure.
Yeah, unless there was an obvious flank march.
Andy, were you about to chip in with a question, or?
Yeah, well, I'll just a couple of observations. Well, you explained why you put a competent commander with the cavalry command. I'd be inclined to put a few light infantry with your heavy chariots to screen them from bows. And the only other query I'd have about this, I'm not very familiar with the Assyrian list, is do you not have any spearmen you can take to protect your?
No, there's no spearmen on the list. I did look through the allies, and there were some allies where you could take spearmen, which would add a spearmen. Most of the allies wouldn't have really added anything to the list that was worth it.
I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Having the missile support.
If allies for the spearmen, you'd end up having to sacrifice either part of the infantry centre or one of the 2 mounted wings. So
yeah, I think the allies normally give you more mounted, stuff. But I think having a big solid line of it's a lot of supported infantry to see in one army. But I guess you do have in this period to think there are a lot of armies with 4 heavy chariot impact. So they're going to hit something, and if the swordsmen aren't supported, they do just suddenly look like a big target with a lot of hit points, don't they?
Just find missile support a waste of points.
I think it is nearly, a lot of the time it's definitely overpointed. But again, if we're looking at this in period, there's I always think there's 2, the Egyptians slightly aside, but actually no, the Egyptians included, there's 2 types of army in the early period. There's one with 4 heavy chariot impact is the strike force, and the missile support will mitigate against that to a degree. And then the other one is the armies with a lot of impetuous foot swordsmen, whether it's the Sea Peoples or the other ones, or even the Egyptians with a lot of the impetuous swordsmen. And the Meshwesh and
with this you could have there's 6 extra points there. With the extra 3 on the competent, take that out. That's 11 points. You get another 3.
Which would give 2 extra foot for I'd screen the heavy chariots, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think I've seen people do surprisingly well where they're anticipating trying to tough it out against impetuous foot. So these swordsmen, don't forget, they cancel the impetuous impact of the impact of impetuous foot. So suddenly you've got someone whose main strike arm is impetuous heavy infantry, who are then going in at evens against a mix of elite and ordinary swordsmen who have all got support. So they've got to win by 2 to break through and get the advantage of their furious charge. So otherwise you just suddenly start grinding them down. So stopping them in that very first round against impetuous foot is one of the very few times that the missile support is actually really good value. And I think you can anticipate fighting a lot of those armies in a biblical period. So it's, I don't think it is great value, but it is better value in this theme than it is in some others. It's probably a better way of saying that. Okay. Let's have a look at Adam's list.
Oh, hello. Okay, so the thinking through this list is, firstly, I had to have strategist because it's Sargon, and that's naming me boy, so I'm going to have to base the army around my child's name, obviously. I then went with, if I'm spending the points on a strategist, one of the things that does is give you the extra scouting point. So if you're putting points into that already, it might be worth reinforcing that. So I went with an ally of Scythians, which gives me in total in the army 6 light horse. So it takes my initiative up to 5, which is always very handy because there are some armies I can see fighting that I would want to defend in mountains. And there's some choice, sometimes I could see that I would want to attack. So having that choice with initiative 5 most of the time, I think is way forward. So the Scythian ally command is 4 light horse, 1 medium cavalry bow, and 1 heavy cavalry bow elite. I've included the Allied General in with the heavy cavalry bow elite. I wasn't going to until I figured out, because I was originally going to have 2 medium cavalry bow because I didn't want to spend too much on this command. But I figured out to make it heavy cavalry and elite costs 4. And if I included the general in with heavy cavalry and elite, he should be kind of safe for a lot of the time. And it only costs 1 point to upgrade that unit to make it more effective.
And you can evade.
Yeah, all that. So that's the Scythians. The middle command, the second command is 2 heavy chariots, 2 guardsmen, heavy armour, 2 guardsmen, heavy swordsmen with armour, a couple of skirmishers, and a poor infantry, heavy swordsman. That sort of goes in the middle and trundles forward and fights. The poor infantry are either there to stretch it out wider if they're fighting things that they might look they can fight against, but it's usually going to be used as a reserve just in case something goes wrong, because it might be poor, but it's still heavy foot. So it might be mediocre, but it's still heavy foot. So as reserve, it can patch a hole quite well. And the first command with a strategist is 3 heavy cavalry bow elite, 3 medium swordsmen ordinary, the Scythian, 2 light horse Scythians to go on a flank, a couple of levies to bump up the number count, and Egyptian bowman mediocre. Now, this command, I like having shooty bow, heavy cavalry, and medium foot together because I think they work well together. The medium swordsmen move surprisingly fast. They can do the terrain thing while the cavalry maneuver around it. I just really like how those troop types work together, especially with lots of command pips, with the 2 light horse on the outside. The bow mediocre does 2 important jobs. One job it does is long range fire support for the elite heavy cavalry bow, preferably sitting in terrain, shooting out of it, but they can also sit at the back. The other important job it does is in trying to get votes of people here to say my army list is better. It almost guarantees Dave's going to vote for my army because it's a mediocre bowman. So
he's triggered by that.
There's only one
Triggered.
of them. You need 2.
Oh,
Need
I'm sorry, I
2.
just didn't have points.
Not quite.
No, one's all right. I had one in my Ordnance French army, and I was happy with that.
Yeah.
No.
But it's an army with initiative 5. There's 24 units in the army, and as most of the fighting troops are elite, I think that's quite a good size for the army.
I'd possibly get rid of the 2 levy and use the points from those to either in your ally move one of the light cavalry to turn into a medium cavalry bow, or change that poor infantry, that heavy sword.
Yeah, he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to change a light horse to medium, because that'll drop his
Initiative.
Yeah.
No, it won't. No, it won't.
I've also got to point out,
to light cavalry, you only need what?
You need 6, and he's got 6.
You need 6. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would also point out, and because like the levy, I could do something else with, because if I dropped from 24 to 23, it wouldn't be a disaster. But I have got 20 bases of biblical levy foot. Okay, so they're going to come out.
That's a good reason.
That's
a good reason to use them.
You could swap them over every bound, couldn't you? You could just give them another run out. Just
Dare I even ask why you've got that much levy foot, or is that just some sort of story when you had too many beers and a baby sham was involved?
DBM.
No, it's playing DBM, and there are armies where you got to use lots of levy, and you could buy 100 figures from Lancashire for about £2.
Yeah.
And they're not the greatest figures, but they're more than good enough. So yeah, that's why I've got them, and they're going to get a run out whenever they can.
Yeah, those Lancashire figures, they definitely work at the 3 foot range, don't they? You paint them up en masse, and you drop on the table and you go, yep, that's a proper army.
Yeah. When you got 20 of them,
3
2 of them's a
cubits.
bit.
Yeah, 3 cubits. But it's an interesting one. I suppose with this army, it's really weird to see a list that doesn't have 4 heavy chariot impact. And,
Exactly.
which is kind of one thing that jumps out. And I do wonder if that command in the middle, I can see the first command, heavy cavalry, medium swordsman, they all move at the same pace. I get that. But that middle command, the chariots are going to go one place and your 3 swordsmen are going to plod along a bit. I don't know if it's easy to coordinate those two when they're doing things.
First turn, as long as you get more than rubbish command dice, first turn the foot go forward 4, the chariots go forward 3. Second turn it's 2 and 3, which puts them back again. So slightly annoying, but I think it's
third turn. The opposition turns up with 4 heavy chariots and smashes you.
Yeah, well, no, but I've got 2, and the thing about guardsmen
you've got 2, so go back and paint the other 2.
But no, it's and the thing about the heavy chariots and the guardsmen working together is the guardsmen, heavy swordsman, armor, or elite. They can stand for quite a long time against most things. And I did consider having missile support, and I've got this army, and I've used this army with missile support, and I just didn't go for it because it's just not worth it. Sometimes it can be, but usually it's just not worth the points. And the heavy chariots and the guardsmen standing next to each other, they're actually kind of quite hard, really. And
you know what I really like standing next to a heavy chariot impact?
Another heavy chariot impact.
Got it. There you go.
Yeah, but how about if the enemy's got lots of spear?
Yeah,
I'll still run over it with a heavy chariot.
Although you still run over them, I'm afraid to say,
yeah.
See,
with the first command,
that's where you see if you've got bowmen, if you've got light infantry bow in front of your heavy chariots, like I do with my Hebrews, you run them forward towards the enemy. And if the enemy have got spears, you move up so that the heavy chariots are pinning the enemy infantry, but there's room for your skirmishers to stand in front, and you just keep shooting. And if they charge, they've got to charge into the chariots, which is bad news for them. Otherwise, they're just going to stand there and take being shot. And if they turn around and go back, they've got their bump to the chariots and then charge in. Simple.
Yeah, and your swordsman armor should do okay against them as well. In the first one, did you toy with that long range shooting about having some of those mixed bow sword units as well to just give you a bit more reach to support the cavalry a bit more?
I did, but then it's then if they have to fight in the rough, they might be against disadvantage because most of the armies these chaps will be facing won't have lots of good heavy foot, but quite a few armies can have good medium foot, and I didn't want to line them up where they could just get run down because they were mediocre when they were fighting.
Yeah, I think when I've used this army,
that's why I didn't go with the mixed units.
Yeah, when I've used it, I think you're right. The mixed units are just not quite strong enough, but then you find that the medium swordsmen, or I've always found the medium swordsmen, they look really cool and they're really nice figures and they look like they make sense in this army. And then you put them on table and you realise everybody else has turned up with impact medium swordsmen, and yours are just not as good. Yours are just not as good.
Or 4 chariots.
But again, that's why.
Yeah.
That's why they're in with the other stuff, because if they've turned up with lots of medium foot, heavy cavalry, bow, elite, unless it's a table full of terrain, and again having an initiative of 5 and being able to sort of like have the last say of terrain, hopefully that should sort of like solve that. I mean, that's the reason why I thought having a high initiative would be good, because there are some armies where you want to be defending in the mountains. There are some armies where you want to be attacking in the plains.
Yeah, I can see that.
I just don't think your army's hitty enough, Adam. I don't think it's got enough punch, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think you need initiative of 5 in the biblical period. I think 4 would be well enough. I mean, 5 might be a little bit of overkill. So I think you can drop, if you're going to take the Scythian, I get at least 2 medium cavalry in there. Maybe drop, maybe drop the horse archers a bit. I know that.
Well, no, I like the horse archers because there's almost no biblical armies that do light foot, so you can sort of like dominate any that do light cav, that do sort of skirmishy cav, so you can sort of dominate that wing of it.
I think the standard way to play this army is to have 4 heavy cavalry bow elite and 4 heavy chariots with another commander which is of the mixed units of shooting. that's kind of the standard way of doing it. So I think what you find with your army, Adam, is you're going to have to put the Scythians with your heavy cavalry on one side of the table to overwhelm the enemy, which would probably work. But then I think you need some shooting in the second division.
See, I understand what you say, Adam, but the problem is a lot of the biblical armies have got like minimum 4 bowmen and stuff like that. So, you know, you just do a Dave and whack them out on the edge, and before you know it, those light horse archers are, you know, hedgehogs.
Well, look, it sounds like we're kind of moving towards a votable conclusion on this one, with a quick summary of why which one's better. So I think, Mr. Saunders, if I start with you, and if we just quickly flip up Tamsin's list as a reminder there, and then flip back to Adam's list.
With reservations on a little bit of tweaking, I would go with Tamsin's list. Sorry, Adam.
It's quite all right.
Because, as I think some of the others said, the 4 heavy chariots are the punch with this army, and what's appealing about the army. I'd actually put more of the heavy cavalry bow in there, and things like that. So I'd probably include some generals in that army. To give myself back up to Dave Allen's golden 21 units, not just 20. That's
okay. All right. Mr. Webb, what about you, sir?
I'm the same with Dave. I've got to go for the 4 heavy chariots, but I would tweak this a lot. It's basically, you could free up so many points very quickly to, you could get to 24 points on this. I do like the idea of heavy cavalry bow elite. But I'd have an included commander. I'd even possibly go allied, take the idea from Adam, because then you can just free up so many points. You'd free up, about 6 points there. And then before you know it, you've added on, some light infantry to screen the heavy chariots. You drop the missile support.
So are you saying, Peter, you do an entirely different list?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of, right, okay.
There's no heavy knights or elephants.
No heady knights, no medium knights, no elephants.
The chariots are heavy.
Chariots are the heavy knights.
Yeah. So Andy, which given because you're not Peter, we're going to sadly restrict you to choosing one of these two. There's no Peter pass out here on this one. Which one of these two are you looking at? The Adam version or the Tamsin version?
Well, again, I'd like to tweak it slightly, but if I had to be forced to use one of the two without any changes, I think I'd go for Tamsin's. I think it's more my style of army.
Okay.
I like the micro command. I like the 4 heavy chariots punch, and that's two features of the army I think would be very useful.
Okay. And Simon, what about you?
Question.
Sorry, someone said something?
Yeah, Mr. Simon, what about you?
Just because there's no elephants, you still have to pay attention.
Yep.
No, I quite like the biblicals. It's never been a period I've gotten into when I played DBM or FOG, but an ADLG, it just plays so much more fun, and it makes sense of a few chariots. It's a chariot period. Enough said. You've got to go for all the chariots. I do like Adam's design of the different mounted commands and all that, but for me, for the chariot period, I'd be inclined to go with the more simplistic of, give me the biggest hammer I can get my hands on, 4 heavy chariot elite impact, and then that big stodgy foot command that you could walk up to someone and say, I'll pick a fight. It just seems quite a very visual type of army that I love to give a go with.
Okay. And I suppose rounding it kind of off for me, I think it is tough, isn't it? Because there isn't so much you can do with this army, and I've fielded it with very mixed success with different incarnations as well, and different ways of putting it together. I think in some ways, Adam, I think your list with those, the thing that does tip it, I think, is that Scythian command, and I think if the Assyrians actually do kind of creep into the very early part of the kind of classical period in a way, some of that early classical, because you're getting up to, what's this, 700 BC, and I think it runs a bit later than that as well. So with those Scythians, I actually think yours is probably a better army for fighting kind of non-biblical armies. You know, it's quite mobile. The 2 heavy chariots is punch. The heavy swordsman's good. And the Scythians would be kind of useful against someone with the textbook, you know, 2 cavalry and 2 horse archers on one flank. But I fear in the biblical period where you get some quite, you know, biggish armies with a wall of rubbish and a lot of swords. Well, not medium swords, but a lot of shooting and the mixed shooters and things like that. I just wonder if having 6 horse archers is actually having too many. And I think, you know, it's that comment Dave made. If the initiative was 4 and those horse archers, I don't think I'd go medium cavalry either, because I think they're still going to get potentially shot up. But looking at the range of things you could fight, in biblical period, I just got a real worry about that viability of that Scythian command. So I would probably again tip towards Tamsin's, but again with a caveat of trying to sort of shuffle it around a little bit, because again I think that 3rd command is pretty lightweight as well. But there's just
so
more
you basically do a different list.
No, I'm just it would be which command I'd be most worried about, I think, really. And I just think I'm more worried about the Scythian command as a big chunk of points than the other stuff in Tamsin's. So I'd probably lean towards Tamsin's as well. But I think it would be closer than for some of the other people, for sure.
This means war.
Okay then, so with that one tucked away nicely, I think it's over to our world of computer expert, Mr. Lee Ray Mayer, and the fantastic random.org to see if we can pick another army, another good one out of it. So sound effect time.
Do Spanish.
Nah, boring. Because I got knights there. We don't. Anyone can use a knight army.
Exactly. So what's random.org tell us this week, Simon?
List 64 Achaemenid Persians.
Oh yeah.
Ooh. It's another proper one. And that's the early Achaemenid? 64 is the early one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, this is the early one. So yeah, the one with Darius.
To immortal, not to immortal.
And his big ladder. Yeah.
Excellent. So who's got who wants to put their hand up for the Achaemenid Persians then?
Well, I think it's my turn actually.
Mr. Finkel, you're definitely there then.
Yeah. Andy, shall we have it? Give it a go.
Yeah.
Well, Simon, sure. you've sent in the list for the last 2 weeks, so we better choose you for the you know, if you're paying attention, we should better choose you this time then for sure. Yeah. So the Achaemenid Persians are coming up next.
Look at that. It's got options. It's got 1.5 pages of stuff that I can get wrong.
Got all sorts.
You can throw all sorts of crap in there, yeah.
Oh yeah.
You're actually going to do a legal list this time.
You need to consult with Dave Allen.
So having picked the armies to go to for next week, we get into another piece of melancholy theme tune as darkness starts to fall across parts of London and south of England. If we all look outside, so and we're into yet another episode. I think it's number 5. Is this possibly 4 or 5 of teaching Timmy about Napoleon? Yes, mopping a tear away from our eyes as that music fades sadly into the French background. So,
but there was no headbanging this time.
No headbanging this time. No, I think that's your quiz music, Andy. You're getting your own.
Oh yeah,
theme tunes. You're getting your
all this French music's confusing me. Yeah,
all this French music's confusing you. So last time, was there an Austrian being beaten, or were you going to do Sharp or something? Something was happening in Saxony.
We just moved into the Spanish Peninsula.
Yeah. I think now's a good time to talk about the Peninsular War, and then we can sort of park that while Central Europe catches up with some of the later events. And this is basically
Mr. Norrell and Jonathan Strange, isn't it? This is the war, in the Peninsular War.
Probably. And
it's Corona.
And it's Sean Bean running around shouting "bastard," which I know is something that fascinates you.
Bastard, right?
Bastard, yeah.
Bastard.
Yeah. So essentially, it was you realise by now the French were beating continental armies in Europe, but they haven't had a chance to beat up the British army simply because they can't get at them because the British are overseas and the French Navy keeps getting beaten. So
that overseas thing's a fairly defining characteristic of the British psyche, isn't it? So I imagine the geography and the psyche hasn't changed there.
No, that's right. So Napoleon is thinking, how can I stop these Brits paying other people to fight me? And he comes up with a kind of reverse Brexit. And he thinks, right, let's ban British trade from Europe. That will cripple their economy. Then they'll be forced to come to a deal with us, and then we can get on with life. So he brings in a thing called
doesn't sound very kind of fighty, economic warfare and trade blockade. But
well, it was. I mean, they were using like privateers to attack British ships and things like that. But so this was his cunning plan, and his idea was to try and make the whole of the bits of Europe he controlled close the ports to British trade. But the people quite like trading with Britain, so he had problems enforcing that. And in fact, remember last week when he beat the Russians and had the peace treaty in the on the raft in the river? One of the conditions he imposed on Russia was to join this continental system and ban British trade. The Russians signed up to this to begin with, but eventually they got fed up of that, and that's part of what led to the fight in 1812 in Russia, which we'll come to one day.
So a trade treaty done on a raft in the Rhine with the Russians made him decide to invade Spain?
Not entirely. Well, I mean, this was...
entirely. Okay, good.
This cancelling screwing the British trade-wise was a general policy by then, and he got the Russians to sign up to that as part of making peace with them. Meanwhile, the Spanish and the Portuguese in particular didn't want to stop trade with Britain, and so Napoleon wanted to go down to the peninsula and force them to close their ports and put his brother on the throne of Spain.
So he was basically invaded Spain to take over the customs office.
Essentially,
something.
yeah.
Was that to do with different hats or something? Because customs officers tend to be quite vicious.
Probably. But by now, you see, the French had changed from bicorns to shakos. And I think it's interesting. We haven't really touched on this, but it's...
what is a shako? What is a shako? Because on my 10mm figures, honestly, I can't really tell much of the difference. I know they're not bicorns, but they look like sort of bear skinny type things.
Well, think of a top hat with the back of the rim chopped off, and you're nearly there.
A top hat with the back of the rim chopped off.
It's cylindrical. It goes up. It's got a little bit of a peak in the front.
All right, okay. And then it has a little spot on the top that you paint in one of a range of different colours.
Or you stick a plume on it or something like that.
Plumes and pom-poms. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So fashions hit the French.
Yeah. And also, the Bavarians had really stupid hats called rabbit elms. They could keep their sandwiches in them.
Right. That's a whole other episode, and we don't want to get into Paddington Bear because that gets into licensing issues probably. So he's designed a new set of hats. He wants to be a customs official in Malaga, so he decides to invade Spain. And was he enemies with Spain? Did he just decide to do it?
Well, by now he was, because he remember he had some troops down in Spain before trying to notionally help the Spanish and then take over, and then the Spanish got a bit upset about that, and it was a bit like Ireland in the 1950s, and everybody believed what the priests told them and did what they were told. So the priests were pro-monarchists, and they whipped up the Spanish into an enthusiasm against the French.
So was there like an L Craggy Island?
Andy's missed an important bit, I think, unless it was
very possible.
The King of Spain had an argument with his son about sort of like various stuff and about who was going to be in charge. So they appealed to Napoleon to sort it out. He sort of said, "Come on, then."
I'm sorry.
They went to Napoleon and said, "Look, what's your opinion, mate?"
Didn't they like ask their missus or something like that, or
no?
Make
They
them
asked Napoleon, and Napoleon's answer was, "You're both fired. My brother's going to be the King of Spain."
Okay, so they regretted asking that question then.
Yes.
Right.
And Napoleon appointed his brother the King of Spain.
It was a little bit silly of the Bourbon king and the Bourbon heir to go to the man who was responsible for killing another Bourbon king.
Yeah. So is that? Does anybody have any explanation why they did this monumentally stupid thing that they didn't have to do?
The Spanish royal family.
That's basically what inbreeding is the answer.
Yeah. And if you name your kings after biscuits, it's never going to end well.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Seemed like a good idea.
Garibaldi, on the other hand, was pretty cool.
Right.
Napoleon's trying to stop the trade between Portugal and England over port and all the alcohol that the English need to get smashed out of their heads of.
But that's still got nothing to do with why a Bourbon king having an argument with his son asked a Bourbon king head chopper off a bloke from France to come and sort out their argument.
I think this comes back to the old traditional thing of like the Bourbon kings were involved in Italy. So right. Napoleon had his brother was, I think this is right, and you'll shoot me down. I think Napoleon's brother was already king of Naples.
No, that was his brother-in-law, Murat.
No, he was king of Naples. And when Joseph became king of Spain, Murat got promoted to be king of Naples.
Oh, I see. So, okay. Yeah.
So was the Bourbon Italy thing like a Garibaldi versus Bourbon biscuit off or something?
Since the medieval period, the Bourbons were kings of Spain and kings of Sicily and
Sardinia, I think, wasn't it?
No, the Bourbons only became kings of Spain in the early 18th century.
Yeah,
Spanish War of Succession.
I'm just getting lost with it. So look, we've got this entirely inexplicable reason why two Spanish people asked a Frenchman to come and sort this out, and he said, "No, my brother's going to do it."
I think it's partly because Napoleon was the biggest kid in the playground. Yeah. So if he said it's going to be like this, everyone would listen to him.
Yeah.
And I think they went to him because they both thought they would say, oh, of course you should be in charge. But Napoleon said, my brother should be in charge.
Okay. So you've got Le King of Spain. You've got Le King of Spain now, who's mini Napoleon's brother. And
getting to the military side of things. So there was the French had armies down in Spain, and Napoleon came down with the main French army.
So he invaded a country. Sorry, Andy. So he invaded a country that his brother was king of after he put his brother on king on the throne.
So, it was at the same time.
Okay, so this was part of the the interesting persuasive narrative of you have asked me to decide this.
They basically went down in a convoy to drop him off.
Okay, so it's basically you've asked me to make this decision. I'm making a decision that neither of you will be particularly happy about. But here's 20,000 French troops marching on somewhere.
More like 80,000, but yeah.
Okay, a lot of them. So the French are piling into Spain to basically shore up a decision that he's made to put
Joseph on the throne. Yeah, right.
And are the armies kind of happy about this? Do they just want all of Napoleon's family ruling Europe and France is cool on this? Because
they get paid, they get a chance to loot. Sunshine, bit of sangria.
The army's Napoleonic. The army is fully behind Napoleon. There wouldn't even be a thought that they didn't do what Napoleon said.
Okay,
they're completely professional. They're in it for the money.
He's up for this then.
Just imagine, they've won an awful lot at this point. They're not going, wow, we're going on sunny holidays. We'll just go in, nick a bit of wine, loot a little bit. We haven't stopped this country yet. He was a bit bored doing Austria again.
They're not conscripts. They're professional. Yeah, they're going to do nothing with their lives other than be soldiers in Napoleon.
Okay. And we've been to some of these places, and there's lots of fortified cities that sort of gave up. Then, isn't there? Is that the story of this? All this army marched around, and the Spanish just gave up.
Now, there were some sieges, places like Zaragoza. There was, I think, a siege that went on for a few months and stuff. But anyway, the main story is Napoleon. The French more or less captured quite a bit of Spain and smashed most of the main Spanish armies. And the British then turn up on the fringes, including an army led by a guy called Sir John Moore, who had trained and formed the Rifle Brigade. Well, it's actually the 95th Rifles at the time.
And is this where the bastard thing comes in?
Yeah,
brilliant.
Right.
Okay,
and so he starts threatening the French supply lines, and Napoleon is on his way back to Central Europe because the Austrians are causing trouble again. So he sends Marshal Soult, this is the beginning of 1809, to chase these French away. And you've got the French chasing the British in winter all the way back up to northern Spain. And the British end up, it's a bit like Dunkirk really, but they end up at a place called Corunna, which is on the northeast coast of Spain. They managed to hold up the French long enough for the British army to get away, but Sir John Moore is mortally wounded and is buried in La Coruña. And so the British get away, and then later on that year, they send another army down with the Duke of Wellington, and he manages to stay and annoy the French for several years, and they just can't get rid of him.
So this is like there's an infestation of Wellington in French-owned Spain. Is Portugal still a separate country this week, or is it?
They keep trying to come out of Portugal to harass Spain, and then a big Spanish army turns up, and then Wellington goes, "These are the troops I've got," and he runs back into Portugal.
He
so
was
it's like
at
going
Wellington
back and
at that point, was he?
He was. He just wasn't Marcus. Wellesley. Yeah.
So that's the same person then, Wellesley and Wellington.
Yeah.
So why did
different footwear?
Right. So why didn't the Spanish then just carry on, or the French, or whoever they were, carry on over the border and just sort of take over Portugal?
They tried.
Terrain.
They tried. Okay.
The supply and terrain were really difficult, and the Spanish had this thing called guerrillas. Basically, if you conquered an area in Spain, you had to leave troops there to garrison it. Otherwise, the locals would run off into the mountains and come down and ambush you and misbehave.
Yeah, nobody told them they'd quit.
So they weren't told how to fight in lines. They just fought like proper, sensible people.
Well, they did try. Well, they formed armies from time to time. Then they got thrashed and they ran away and hid in the hills and started shooting at the French from behind.
Other thing about Portugal is they did overrun Portugal. So the British army run back to Lisbon, built loads of fortifications, got supplied by sea, and just sat behind the fortifications for a year, going bugger off, we're not going, bugger off.
And the French,
while the French run out of food.
Bastards.
Essentially, the French, everybody's used to fighting field armies and proper pitched battles. But the French are being absolutely murdered in their rear by the guerrillas and people. And it becomes a really dirty war. And some of the greatest art of all time is actually painted on the atrocities of the French.
Well, there's Goya's painting, isn't it?
Goya's black paintings, which are in Madrid, basically they're some of the greatest paintings ever done. And that they're called the atrocities of war, and there's bodies which have been, cut up by the French and hung on, because they're trying to discourage the guerrillas of fighting behind the lines. And that's the guerrilla war is what stops the French managing to take control. They bite off more than they can chew, and that becomes such a drain that this is the first time Napoleon has a real setback.
So but he's not. Well, so he's not there. So he's
after 1809, he's leaving other guys to run the war for him.
Yeah, he's running Russia.
He's delegated that, and he's probably going to beat the Austrians this week again. Exactly. And the French, and he's got his brother-in-law. No, his brother is supposedly running Spain, but there's lots of guerrillas painted blue in the hills, making it awkward. And there's a bit of Benny Hill music round, and they're just chasing Wellesley around. And Wellesley keeps going back to drink some port and gets supplied by sea, and then comes out again. And then, so how does the Duke of Wellington presumably get promoted to be the Duke of Wellington?
But he keeps winning battles.
And he wins battles. I thought you were saying he just lost them all and just ran away.
No, he didn't lose any battles. But
he just chose to leave before the end.
He didn't have enough troops to withstand the French invasion into Portugal.
Right.
In the first half of the war up until 1812, he won battles, but there were too many French who would run out, go, I've beat you a bit, and then run back to Lisbon.
Right.
In 1812, when lots of the French disappeared because of Russia and that's when he went, right, come on, boys, now we're going to go forwards. And 1812 is when the British and the Portuguese advanced out of Portugal into Spain.
Okay, so the first half of the war, it was like he was sort of 1-0 up. It was getting sort of half time, and then he'd run around the back and then he'd switch the floodlights off, pull the plug out, and go, let's call this a win.
It was more like, first half he'd run out. Oh, I've done all well in the first half, and then the second half, two teams turn up to play against you, so he runs back again.
Yeah, that would be a bit tricky, wouldn't it? Yeah, I
masters
could
a
see that would
tactic.
be awkward.
He masters a tactic. He lines his armies up on reverse hills so that the French artillery can't see his troops. And this is the tactic, which is his masterstroke of how to. So he hides his army behind hills or on a slope.
Right.
And like he's behind the hill, and when he comes up to the front, so he fights a very defensive method of he fights a very defensive sort of warfare, which he's learned in India, I think.
Right.
Yes. And this is his masterstroke, and how he revolutionised him, because that's why he becomes the big hero in the end.
And tactically, they actually outskirmish the French, the British do.
Right.
Because the French kind of invented modern skirmish warfare in the Napoleonic times, and the British become better at it than the French are.
And what that just meant, they could find where they were earlier and set up behind the hill before they arrived.
Yes.
Yeah, it meant that the French couldn't soften them up with skirmish fire, which is what the French column tactics were based on.
Okay.
And it negated the French artillery.
So in a kind of game sense then, are these interesting battles to fight, or is it just overwhelming force on one side and one retreats?
No, there's some cracking battles, because you've got cavalry charging down, breaking squares. You've got a lot of flanking maneuver using the terrain. You've got a lot of skirmishes happening as well. But you've got all different troop types as well, because you've got a variation of the different French troops, from elite to absolute rubbish. And then on the Allied side, you've got the British troops, you've got the Portuguese, which could be variable, and the Spanish could be extremely variable. From
you got the King's German Legion, which are basically German troops in British uniforms, and you've got the Brunswickers in their black uniforms.
And is this textbook kind of, red coats with white facings and white trousers and stuff, playing against French people in blue coats and white trousers?
Well, apart from the rifles in green, the Brunswickers in black,
Portuguese in blue,
Spanish, so it all gets nicely messy.
So if I wanted to kind of get that,
British cavalry and artillery, a lot of them were in blue.
Okay, all right. Well, at least I could then use my Union American Civil War troops for that, I'm sure, and I just get some recycling out of it.
No, the hats are wrong.
Not from that distance.
Gordon's theory is that you put everybody in greatcoats and shakos, and they can be either size. You're in campaign uniform, and they all look the same in a campaign uniform.
As far as it goes, that's probably true. But why would you? It's like toy soldiers, Napoleonic. If you do dress for uniforms, it's really, really colourful.
Yeah.
So, it's the point of playing with toy soldiers, isn't it?
I suppose.
Putting them in a grey overcoat.
All right. So we talked about a whole period of the Napoleonic Wars in which Wellington became Wellington. Napoleon wasn't really there. His brother owned Spain, but couldn't keep hold of it. The British won, even though they kept retreating back to Lisbon, and in a war that had been caused by a trade blockade that the Russians didn't sign up to, and then it's sort of peters out. Does the Brits end up owning Spain after this? Or
no, we don't.
They give it back to the Spanish.
They give it back.
We walk south of France.
Eventually, they drive the French out.
Festival.
After Napoleon is defeated in Russia, the British get control.
Is that a spoiler? Were we supposed to not know that until the next episode? But,
basically, the war in Spain goes on and on and on, because the best of the French troops are elsewhere, and we can't.
So this is a war on two fronts then? This is half of a war on two fronts?
Yeah, for Napoleon. But if you're talking 1812, it's also a war on... Britain's also fighting another war.
I'm imagining they're also... the French must be fighting the Austrians somewhere, so there's probably a third front. But the thing I'd never really understood was this sort of faffy about bit in Spain, but because I didn't realise it was at the same time as the
it was at the same time as other stuff, and Napoleon could never really devote his full strength to sending enough guys down to Spain. The French had a slogan for Spain, which is small armies lose and big armies starve.
Right, so it was like their Afghanistan, I suppose.
Exactly,
yeah, basically, yeah.
A French Afghanistan. Okay. Well, look, I think that's certainly told me something I didn't know, in the war in Spain with the bastards thing was at the same time as that thing in Russia that presumably we're going to talk about next week.
Yeah, we've got the Austrians come out of the go before then.
Yeah, but that's a default. That's a default. I'm assuming they have a go at all times.
Yeah, I just want to get plenty of use out of my Austrian army.
No, we haven't done the Danube campaign of 1809 yet.
No, Marshal Land hasn't died yet.
Yeah, we like Marshal Land. Marshal Land's a good guy.
Right. Well, I'm sure the Danube campaign is probably sort of slow and languorous. I imagine something like that.
Exciting.
But we've got a week or so to decide whether we talk about the Danube campaign or whether we try to jump over the Danube campaign and go to the exciting bit in Moscow that I do know something about.
No, I think we should do the Danube campaign next week.
Fine. Let's dive into that exciting yet unknown Danube campaign.
And
are there any Yorkshiremen involved?
Hats.
Are there any Yorkshiremen involved?
No, just
not I'm aware of.
Right. So on that note, I think it's the bastard end of the bastard war in Spain. Oh, that was a thing, wasn't it? My lord. I'm not quite sure what sort of thing it was, but it was certainly a thing. And I'm kind of left with a sort of feeling of that was a bit of a sideshow, but seems to have gained a lot of TV coverage. And
there's a lot going on.
And then he ended up being in like Lord of the Rings and stuff as well. And also, so it's very good for Sean Bean's career.
I do remember seeing Napoleon in Lord of the Rings.
So look, with the Napoleonic Wars receding into the distance in the same way that Arthur Wellesley's army would have receded over the Portuguese mountains towards the safety of Lisbon. How good is that? Is that a thing?
Yeah, very good.
Very good. Okay, see, I'm learning as we speak.
Do you know what the lines were? Torres?
I'm sorry?
Torres Vedras.
Torres Vedras. I think I've got a bottle of that, possibly later. Or maybe I'll just go straight to the Scotch after another episode of learning about Napoleon. And so I think with that we can leap free of the chains and shackles of war in Spain and move into the almost like the Napoleonic Arthur Wellesley and possibly Duke of Wellington-esque army, and leap over the Pyrenees and on the way stop in Andorra and go to an après-ski French disco.
Question, comment les voir? Question, le trou est sans fond. Question, la légende le dit. Question, elle dit aussi. Question, c'est une maladie. Question.
So then, that disco music can only mean one thing, and that thing has to be Andy Finkel and your quiz of the week. Andy, hit us with last week's questions, last week's answers, and then whatever slightly weird and left field but vaguely military themed set of questions thematically you're going to inflict upon us. Sorry, gift us with this week. Fire away.
Right. Well, last week's quiz was called French Toast, and I told you the following three army marshals all died in unusual circumstances. And how did they die? Dave, for you for the pronunciation, please. Maurice de Saxe.
No idea.
No, you
Maurice de Saxe.
Yeah, you pay attention. In 1750. Anyone know how he died?
Drowned in a barrel of rum.
There was an incident with him and a horse, half a tin of caviar, and a bottle of cognac.
Not
swallowed
quite,
a fly.
No, he was actually having a sort of entertainment with 8 actresses, and it all proved a bit much for him. And his death certificate describes him as having died from a surfeit of women.
Okay. Right, a surfeit of women.
De Saxe indeed.
Yeah. Took 3 of them to nail down the coffin, but there we go. Right. Next one is Alexandre Berthier in 1815.
He either fell, jumped out of, or was thrown out of a window.
Correct. Do you know where that was?
Defenestration. Prague. No?
No.
Well
Good.
Sweden.
No. There's a place called Bamberg in Germany. And rumour Russian armies marching towards France to attack France. But some people think he was murdered, and really Napoleon really missed him, because had Berthier been in charge of the French staff in the Waterloo campaign, almost certainly the French army would have performed better. You wouldn't have had some of the command screw-ups that took place.
Right. Well, a bit of self-defenestration always erodes most great commanders' confidence.
It's not the sort of thing you tend to
I've got to
do too
say,
often, is
the
it?
verb to defenestrate is probably the best verb that's ever been invented.
Yeah.
I still think one of the greatest things about it is that there were 2 defenestrations of Prague. How does that happen?
Well, you do one. You've got to
And
do
it's
another.
impossible to tell which was the more important.
Yeah. Yes. Indeed. So, Andy, sorry, we're interrupting here. We actually, each time we interrupt and digress, it's a step away from that music again. So crack on, please do.
Right. Third one was Edouard Mortier in 1835.
He's called Edward Death, isn't he? I can imagine.
No, Mortier. Well,
So this is 1835. It's way after the.
There must have been some war going on. It's still military.
Algeria?
No, he died. He was part of the entourage of the King Louis Philippe, and the king was inspecting the National Guard at a parade which he did every year, and this disgruntled political activist tried to assassinate the king by using what was described as an infernal machine, and it's basically a 29-barreled volley gun. Each barrel fired 8 bullets, and when he fired this thing, 15 of the barrels went off, 7 of them didn't, and 1 blew up in his face. But of the 15 barrels it fired, so he took out about 100 bullets. It took out most of the king's entourage. The king got a slight nick on the forehead, not seriously wounded. But this General Marshal Mortier, who'd been one of Napoleon's generals, copped a full blast of this thing and was mortally wounded.
Oh.
So he died of Warhammer.
Yeah, yeah. And the infernal machine, yes, it was like being hit by a full volley of heavy bullets, but not in a war.
An early anarchist assassin.
Yeah, that's it. Anarchist, yeah.
Well, I think with that, I think that's this week's questions, and I think it's now time for your full volley of infernal bullets, which makes up your next set of questions.
Question, comment les voir? Question, le trou est sans fond. Question, la légende le dit. Question, elle dit aussi. Question, c'est une maladie. Question.
Indeed, right. Well, this week's quiz is called Mad Men. All I want to know is, who are the following 3 odd fellows? Number 1, the Scandinavian king who joined the First Crusade by sailing via the west coast of France to the Middle East, helping to capture Acre with his fleet, sailing back to Constantinople and then home overland. And later he went mad, imagining that there were fish swimming in his bathtub, and according to the author Jan Jones, quotes, was prone to descend into bouts of manic cackling which rendered him helpless.
I think that could be any member of Central London War Games Club.
Yeah,
really,
I was thinking, I know quite a few war gamers often do that.
Yeah, but none of them are kings of Scandinavian countries, so that kind of.
Well, we don't know. We only ever ask them about what armies they use, don't we? They could all have a backstory.
As far as I know, the news we've got is a baron. I'm not sure we've got
Could be Yaki.
It could be anyone. Right. Okay. Next question.
Right. The Napoleonic commander who used to chew garlic, rub gin on his chest, fought a battle 2 days after being unhorsed in another battle at the age of 80, and suffered delusions that a French Imperial Guard grenadier had made him pregnant and that he was going to give birth to an elephant.
We're all back to members of Central London War Games Club, isn't it? It could be, again, it could be any number of people.
It reminds me of a certain night.
There are libel laws, guys. Just remember that.
That was a good night, Dave, by the way.
Yes, it was.
All over again.
And number 3, the Confederate general who, as a young infantry commander, engaged in a furious exchange of correspondence regarding the supply of uniforms to his company with the quartermaster of the fort, and he was a quartermaster. Later, during the Mexican-American War of 1847, his own troops tried to assassinate him by exploding a 12-pound artillery shell under his cot. The cot was destroyed, but he survived unscathed. And during the Civil War, his subordinate generals disliked him so much they signed a round-robin letter asking President Jefferson Davis to remove them from command of their army.
Yep, another popular fella. Obviously a bad dice roller. Okay. Well, look, I think that's that's a very, very strong return to form on the completely bizarre questions. And I think on that note of the bizarre, I think it's time for another note or a dozen of the bizarre as we fade out with Andy's theme tune music.
Comment les entendre? Question. Comment les voir? Question. Le trou est sans fond? Question. La légende le dit? Question. Elle dit aussi? Question. C'est une maladie? Question.
Strange quiz questions, strange quiz music, and we're creeping towards that magic 2-hour mark as well. So just with a quick roundup before we go then of what's on the painting table for the coming week. So Simon Leray Mayer up in that top left-hand corner. What stuff's being painted by you this week?
I'm doing something completely different from ADLG, and I've found an old 6mm modern micro armor, British Army. So I'm painting that up.
Fantastic. Is that Chieftain era or is it post Chieftain?
Definitely Chieftain era. So this is a 1980s era army for Cold War commander.
Great.
So I've got chieftains. I've got APCs with mortars into it and little four-wheel scout cars and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's all quality dross.
Good. And the big question for that scale is to whip aerial or to not whip aerial?
Definitely have to whip it.
So what do you do for the whip aerials? Because I'm always tempted, and then
toothbrush.
6mm.
Yeah. So I get
wow.
the bristles of a toothbrush.
Yeah.
And then you with a either Dremel or pin vise, just drill a couple of little holes in the back of the aerial, the turret, and I put the paint toothbrush bristles into it, and they work quite well because they're so long. You can cut it down to give you the right visuals. So I've done like for my command vehicles, where there's like an M113, the boss comes out with a cup of tea. You put a whole bunch of aerials, and you get the different effect for them. And then on the tanks, you have slightly smaller ones. So you look and go, yep, that's a commander.
My main question of the British Army of that era was, you've got a 120mm recoilless rifle. What was the thinking behind calling it a wombat?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's just killing death machine. That's what we're going to call it. It's a wombat. It's just like...
You've never seen what a wombat can do to an Australian 22-wheel rigger. When the truck hits the wombat, the truck rolls over, the wombat walks off, goes. So,
I think that
excrement is in an interesting shape.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget, Australian military have in the early 20th century came to the conclusion that you don't take on Australian wildlife.
The emu war.
Oh, yeah.
If we're talking about wombats, Peter, your badger on the head, is that any potential of that becoming a wombat on the head at some point?
Mate, no, it's like pure badger, not wombat.
It's pure badger on the head.
Wombat the wrong colour.
Right. Okay then. Dave, any kind of antipodean wildlife for you this week, or is it just Ottomans?
I've met antipodean wildlife in vehicles. But that's another story.
You can meet them in pubs as well.
That's another very funny
story. Did the police mention much about that?
No. A friend of mine's Renault 12 hit a kangaroo when I was in the back, and the kangaroo went over the roof and then dusted itself off and hopped off. 50 miles an hour. It suffered but the Renault 12 was a complete write-off.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Finkel, what's your, we were going to talk about next week's painting, but what's your Australian wildlife story of the week?
I'm struggling to think of one at the moment, but...
Okay, tell us about painting then. It's I know it's a step down, but...
Pikemen, and if I finish the pikemen, then it's into Roman, late Roman legionaries. But I'll probably get distracted, hopefully getting one or two games of ADLG online, if I'm lucky.
Okay. All right, Adam, what about you? What Australian wildlife story?
Yeah, I met this Australian girl once in Portsmouth, and she was just like wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was happy memories. But painting, I'm going to finish off my Mongols, finish off the horses, and then I've actually got a Doctor Who game because my kids love Doctor Who. So I'll probably, as well as doing Mongols, I'll probably also be doing Cybermen this week. Weirdly enough.
So are you going to go for the paint? Are you going to go for the textbook approach of spray them gold to start with, and then rescue it from that? Is that your starting point?
Nearly. I think I might spray them silver or spray them gunmetal, and then that's about it, really. But maybe a wash.
Now, Adam, the important question is: you've got Cybermen, but will you have Daleks as well?
Yeah, no, the Daleks will be doing after the Cyber. The thing about the Daleks is it takes some thought about how to paint them, because Daleks are very, very different colour-wise over the different series. Whereas Cybermen are just spray them gunmetal, put a wash on, really. So I'm going to leave the thought until later.
All right. Tamsin, any Australian wildlife stories for you?
No.
Any painting this? Oh, no, we talked to you. You mentioned earlier you've got scatter terrain to do. Do you think you'll get some figures this week?
There's a couple of figures in among the stuff that I primed today, among the resin stuff. I mean, because I ordered a couple of bits for Judge Dredd from a company that had come across a couple of bits. I think it's I'm trying to remember the name of the company. They do loads of various resin bits, and which included some graph boards, surfers, motorbike.
So more denizens of Mega City 1 then we might see by next time we rejoin.
Yeah, you might see a couple more.
Okay. All right. Well, before we kind of wrap up with Peter, I do actually have another Australian wildlife story that's got a wargaming thing. So this is a probably apocryphal story in the world of military training and simulation, in that I think the Americans were selling the Australian military a kind of a simulation platform for training and helicopter training. And what you do when you buy a sim platform, it's like buying a computer game, and you plug in different bits of terrain and modules for different vehicles and aircraft and the other thing. And everything that you add into the game is kind of a downloadable content that you pay extra for. So to do helicopter training in the outback, the Australians had bought a kind of 3D model of the outback so that their helicopter pilots could fly in a virtual environment exactly like the one they would do. But obviously in the outback, you do get herds of kangaroos. And the Americans who they bought this software from didn't really have kind of the kangaroo stuff. They didn't have kangaroos as a module. And so they kind of got something and reskinned it. So they got a platoon of infantry that had behavioral characteristics, because if you swoop down with a helicopter, a platoon of infantry will spread out and run away from it. And so they reskinned the infantry with kind of kangaroo visuals so that you could fly across the desert, and when you don't zip down, the kangaroos would scatter, even though there's a platoon of infantry. And the Australians thought this was really, really good, right up until the point about the behavioral characteristics of the kangaroos started launching shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles back at the helicopters, because that was also programmed in as part of the behaviour for an infantry platoon in this bit of software. So other than that, I've been thinking over the last hour.
Maybe the Americans have been watching Tank Girl.
Yeah, that could be it. Tank Girl could have been a real thing. But
Tank Girl.
But I think this, my next painting project, I probably do need to bite the bullet on the ships, because I think the 28mm Arabs is going to be quite a big project, and the ships have been sat there for a while, and it will be doing something else different. And it also keeps me on the small scale stuff for when I think Dr. Alex Sokolov, my remaining Malifaux figure, comes as a special edition through the post, so I can still be in single figure mode. So I just need to decide which nationality I try and paint these ships up as, for that particular game, the Black Seas thing, and I will try and avoid buying.
But you could paint them as French, then you could put them on, then they could be on fire.
Yes, they could be anything, could they? I could do the fire as well. I'm good at painting the fire. That's my skill. So, Peter, just to wrap up this week, now you've got everything arrived by post. You've got multiple choice. what are you going to be focusing on this week?
Well, the Aussie wildlife one, just to answer that one, sailing off the barrier reef. We jumped in the water, went for a swim round, a bit of a snorkel, only for 3 sharks to come alongside us and swimming alongside us. And managed to get 5 of us to manage to jump out of the water back on the boat very quickly, funnily enough.
Okay. They weren't like badger hunting sharks, were they, or anything?
No, I wasn't sort of like badgerish looking at that point. It was
you weren't quite
many years ago.
Right.
Hence the fact I was able to jump back on the boat.
Yeah, but if it happened again, the badger would scare off the sharks, wouldn't it?
Is that why your hair's grey?
No, that's kids.
Right. Okay. So on the painting story then, wrap us up with whatever you're painting.
I'm slowly working my way through the Austrians, so I think I'll have the rifleman done. I want to do some of the landwear because just going into battle with a top hat is just too goddamn cool. Yeah. And they're not white. And then I'll try and finish off the grenadiers, but I just want to have a big push to get a load of them done next weekend. So provided there's not too many distractions with work, kids and everything else, I just want to rattle through them because then I get to move on to my knights, my Spanish knights. Navarre. Hey.
Navarre, the Knights of Navarre. Fantastic. Okay, well, look, that's a good wrap up. Another 2-hour special. And so thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you, Adam, for departing from Bass and actually having lager as well to bring along to this.
I think the G is soft. It's larger.
Larger, because you have.
You know, we actually thought he was buying Baby Sham and got it wrong.
It could have been Baby Sham. So
hey,
we'll.
I'll have a baby. No, that's not going.
No. So with 15 weeks down, we'll put this one in the can. And goodbye from me. Goodbye from everybody. See you in a few weeks. Stay safe out there. Bye.
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 Is there an army list that you can have knights and elephants?
Yeah.
No, don't think so.
Because I think it's the only army that Peter won't say, oh, well, the problem with this is.
Yeah.
So what army can you have knights and elephants?
This means war.
That's very interesting, Adam, but you're still on mute. But yeah, not on mute anymore. Still, you've decided that's not worth repeating, clearly.